Everybody. I hope you had a snack and a little break there. Tell you a little bit about myself while people are still being able to find their seats. I'm an outdoors education leader, so I like to get out in nature, and I often take my students out in nature for several reasons. I lead outings in the forest and in different kinds of environments with people from the community as a volunteer. And the joy of doing that, one of the joys of doing that is that before I lead anybody on a hike or a trek or a walk, whatever you might like to call it, I have to do the whole thing by myself first for the safety. So that gives me a chance to get out and look at what's going on and see the animals, the flora, fauna, the plants, and it's a very special time for me to get out and do that. And I was hoping to do that before I got here, before I came to the university and get out and trek, but I didn't get to do that. So what would I see if I actually got out there and got on a trek today? Yeah, around these hills. What would I see? Make a picture of it on your paper. Make a picture of it on the back of your paper, please, for me. What would I see? I don't think I'd see a monkey. I was watching the monkeys in Delhi. What would I see? Would I see a bird? Would I see a snake? I know I wouldn't see an alligator or a crocodile, right? I don't think you have those here. It's too cold. What would I see? Please give me a picture of that because I'm inside buildings here and I'm not sure I'm going to get a chance to get out. So, and then right underneath what it is, I'm sure you're wonderful artists, but I might not know exactly what that thing is from experience. So tell me, is that a bird? Do you know its name? Is that a flower? I've seen a few flowers around the university, and the short time I was in an office yesterday, a lizard joined me. And I refrained from catching it and taking it back outside, but I empathized because it was stuck in the room and it couldn't find its way out. I used to catch lizards a lot as a child and take them back outside when they get in the building, but the tail would always come off and I'd be stuck with this tail. Like, what do I do with this tail? Follow the lizard out and give it to him? But anyway, I really appreciate nature, and I wish I had time to get out into your environment here, especially around Aizawl, and see what you have. All I know is from the drive from the airport to here, I saw quite a bit, looking down the sides of the cliffs, which was really, really fun. And I'm amazed at what wonderful drivers you have here. I haven't seen an accident yet. In the United States, we have all these clear demarcations of lanes and sidewalks and parking spaces, and people crash all the time. I don't know. And here you're just wonderful drivers. So, okay, so it's a curriculum. And I think you can find it online if you want, because it's on the internet. So they will have resources if you wish. And they actually hire teachers on their break in the summertime to write books about women and girls, famous or not famous, as to create curriculum, and they pay those teachers to do that. Wouldn't that be a wonderful project to have here? So, so human rights through her history. That's what we're going to go through right now. And so morality came up earlier when we defined what is a human. It's a more moral animal. And morality is very, very important aspect of human rights. Moral claims are usually the foundation of the laws pertaining to human rights, what is considered right and wrong. And the laws are our systems of accountability, and they vary around the world, and I'll have another presentation on that another day. But so these morals end up in codes for behavior, and then we use those codes when there have been violations of human rights to try to help people get their rights and try to help states or organizations who are supposed to be monitoring that and providing rights to do that. Dr. Mishra, I asked them to draw, so they're not off task. If you see a bird or a tree on their paper, I asked them to show me what Mizoram looks like, so I needed to see that since I don't get out and hike. Okay, so the laws that are made into codes for each region or state, as well as international venues, are ways of having accountability and manifesting rights. So human rights have an ethical foundation. So ethics are basically the codes for behavior in a society. You have your own codes for behavior, and morality within those codes are how people exhibit their adherence to them. And the values are what underlie that morality. So let's see, in ethics, an example might be we have rules about how we treat each other as humans. And a morality might be no harm to another person. And there are conditions of that, of course. Self-defense is one. And a value underlying that is caring. Caring for each other and the whole community would mean non-harm. So ethics, morals, and values are strong influences in what's acceptable in a culture, community, society, and the government. And they, and as you know, vary. So valued behaviors, ethical guidelines in communities and societies stipulate what's permissible human behavior according to their cultural values and norms. As I said earlier, ethics are about right and wrong and satisfactory social interactions. I'm trying to think of an example here. What I heard from you earlier about who is not in this community, in this region, not receiving their rights, that your identification of those people demonstrated the ethics that you have here, that you're aware that those people of certain identities are not getting their full rights, they're not realizing their full rights through education at least. That shows the ethics and the values that you already know, even though they're not being enacted. And morals are the conducts, the codes that tell you what is acceptable or not in ethics. And so the morals that we see quite often in human rights expressions are fairness and justice and harmony. And ethics, values, and principles express moral beliefs across the population is the general idea I want you to have here. So let's look at an Indigenous American example of one moral. And that is the Haudenosaunee people, which is a collection, and I'll talk more about that in a couple of minutes, is a collection of different tribes. And they have their own nation within the USA. They're a federation of tribes, and they have their own nation in the USA, have a value that they have promoted and retained across generations, and they're still promoting this value, which is a little bit challenging given their pressure to be assimilated into so-called modern society. And this value, called the seventh generation value, emphasizes preservation. So let's see if I can get the link to work this time. The last one didn't. Did it? Oh, some reason the links aren't going. Okay, maybe by tomorrow we can have this figured out. So I have here a link to their website that's not showing, but, or maybe I'm not clicking on the right thing. I don't know, you can just tell me tomorrow. I'll just read it to you. The Haudenosaunee have a core value called the seventh generation, while the Haudenosaunee encompasses traditional values like sharing labor and maintaining a duty to family, clan, and nation, and being thankful to nature and the Creator for their sustenance. The seventh generation value takes into consideration those who are not yet born, but who will inherit the world. In their decision-making, chiefs consider how to present day decisions that will impact the descendants. Nations are taught to respect the world in which they live as they are borrowing it from future generations. I like this idea of borrowing it from the future. This is not about you. This is about what you're doing for the moment, and it's about the future and who's going to live here next. The seventh generation value is especially important in terms of culture. Keeping cultural practices, language, and ceremonies alive is essential if those to come are to continue to practice Haudenosaunee culture. Okay, so that's just an example of how one value is being maintained. Let me get back to it. Okay. Here's an African example. So African ethics are humanistic, and they're based on considerations of human welfare. Indigenous beliefs and values are evident in the morality, while religion is commonly a practice across Africa. Christianity is very widespread there. African ethics involves expectations of people's moral character. The newborn is neither morally good or bad. The community teaches, especially with proverbs and folk tales, about its expectations for good moral character. Good character is acquired, and bad behavior is not innate. It is learned. What is right is determined by the community as a social good in each situation. Interactions that smooth social relations and uphold the social structure are good. So the value of Umuntu, Gomuntu, Gabantu, a person is a person because of or through other persons, is a very strong expression of community and non-individualism. And again, these are highlights for links, but we're not getting out there, so, and for time's sake anyway, we'll move on. So the social concept is moving fast forward into more modern her history. And it is the idea that the leader of a community, of a nation, needs to make decisions that protect people's rights. And that is a contract that people have with the leader. That was a very modern idea, that leaders are responsible, even though they may be monarchs, they're responsible for the protection of the people in their order. So when individuals live outside of a society and political order called a state of nature, expressed by Thomas Hobbes in his book, Leviathan, they use their conscience and personal power. Jean-Jacques Rousseau's conception of the social contract emphasizes individual forfeiture of rights to the collective for bringing about the conditions that are equal for all. So the community, again, is more important than the individual. Values evident in statements that delineate human rights express freedom, equality, protection, and opportunity. And these were, quite a lot of this was in your mind already, when evident in the concepts brainstorm you did. So then the concept of natural rights came along. John Locke emphasized natural rights, that people are not naturally controlled by a monarch, a king, a queen, a leader. They should adhere to that for the sake of good and maintain peace. If it's fair, if they have protection of life, liberty, and property. I thought that was interesting in here, that property came into the concept, no matter where and in which side they were born. Churches don't have control over people. And they have the natural right to seek God through their own way, their own reasoning, their own spirituality. Tolerance of other spiritualities and faiths should occur except when those who are different cause harm in a society. Those harmers of the dominant or minority faith must be stopped. So this concept of natural rights really took off and was enacted. It was underlied many revolutions around the world, particularly in the West, changing monarchies. So responses to harm. Responses to harm stimulated human rights statements while humans strove for reduction of violence by and against humans, beyond monarchs, reduction of violence. So this is getting back to the Haudenosaunee. So the Haudenosaunee Federation came about through violence. In North America, there were several tribes that were competing with each other for resources up around the Great Lakes region of Lower Canada, what's now USA, and North America. And this is pre-colonialism, before Europeans even came over. They were really, really fighting with each other. They were cannibalizing. And it was really, really violent. And a person who was born and rejected by his family because he had a major disability, a major speech impediment. So he was given up by his family and adopted by a different clan, Deganawida. He was adopted by them, and he had a vision, and his vision was of all these people stopping their violence. And he decided that he was going to set about making that happen. But how is he going to do that when he can hardly speak? So he found Hiawatha, who was quite a clear speaker, almost an orator, of another different clan. And these are, supposed to be enemies. But they got together, and over many years, they visited each one of these groups, the Mohawk, Onondaga, Oneida, Cayuga, Seneca, and eventually the Tuscaroras. It took them many years and violence. The Tuscaroras actually had all of Hiawatha's family murdered in retaliation for him even coming over to try to negotiate a peace agreement. And he came back the next year and said, "I'm still trying." And that really, really impressed the Tuscaroras, and they joined. So they made an agreement, and they made the first federation in North America, the first constitution in North America, and it was a democracy, and it was gender inclusive. It was a matriarchy. It still is. So the family follows the woman's line. The husband moves into the woman's house. The children take the woman's family name. And this was throughout all of the Americas was going on. It's still very common there culturally. So the women were advisors to the chiefs. They still are. They're called clan mothers. And I have a link here, but I'm not able to get these links open. So the clan mothers are still active. They're still identified. They're still advisors. The Haudenosaunee Nation is still there. And people have their own passports as members of the Haudenosaunee. And these are all, they're retaining their values as much as they can and working for peace and human rights. And it's really a challenge given that society is quite often changing around them. I remember when one of the wars broke out internationally, and there was an expectation in the United States that people would join the forces to go fight in the war. The clan mothers wrote in email, "No, we're not making moccasins." In other words, you don't have any shoes to go to war. You're not going anywhere. We're not in this fight. Okay, another example of combating harm and responding to harm and human rights and the ideas of natural rights and progress was the Haitian Revolution. In Haiti, in the island of Hispaniola, the slaves ended Hispaniola and started Haiti. They rebelled. It was a very, very violent rebellion. But they got rid of France. They kicked France out, and they became their own nation. And regardless of color, regardless of skin color, everybody belonged in Haiti. And that played out differently over time, but it didn't matter what your skin color was. Everybody had equal rights, human rights, no matter your background or color or whatever. So new codes and procedures started coming out with these revolutions and these ideas. And one was the English Bill of Rights, and it stipulated freedom from cruel and unusual punishment. We had monarchs doing that at their own will. The United States Declaration of Independence, and of course, this is the idea that all men are created equal. They didn't include women in any of those rights, even though the women lived there and helped support the revolution quite a bit. That came much 200 years later. The Declaration of Rights of Man and of Citizens in the French Revolution. This conveyed also human rights as natural and universal. Everybody should have these rights. But it was ambiguous because the rights of women, along with citizens and slaves in the French colonies, didn't get those rights. Even the lower class citizens, called culottes, by their attire and what they couldn't afford to buy, didn't have those rights. So we had these statements, but they're not really equitably enacted. But this is what's going on in the 1700s. And then comes along in the 1900s the United Nations, post-World War II. It was just so horrific, and the first international collaboration across nations that joined at that time came up eventually with the Declaration of Human Rights that you're very familiar with, I'm sure. And that included the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. And those were distinct. The second one is considered more like soft law. Do you have the right to work? Can you find work? Are people letting you work based on your identity? Your social rights, your cultural rights, are you allowed to practice your own language? Are you allowed to worship in your own way? Are you allowed to have your own spiritual expressions? So these two documents were originally separated, and more recently they have been merged. But that was the original idea. And then declarations just kept coming out. They just kept branching. So in 2005, UN Secretary Kofi Annan in the UN Commission on HR was changed to HR Council. That was smaller and HR compliant, so now they're trying to watch and make sure, okay, we have all these declarations, but how are they being applied? And the declarations are non-binding. You know, no, we don't have any way to get states to enforce these. So they started to get more specific, saying if we make more specific declarations, then maybe the states will pick them up. So here's one: rights persons belonging to ethnic, religious, and linguistic minorities, and the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Two very, very relevant topics here. And so some of the organizations that were born, and many of these still exist, are listed here. I won't read. Can you read this in the back? I think so. Okay, good. So I won't read all this to you. So the one at the bottom, the Asian Human Rights Charter, was made in 1998. This is just showing a progression across the last century of how these different organizations came about. And it declared by the Asian Human Rights Commission, that is a non-governmental organization, it brings to attention the realities of human rights in the region and the need for the due process to enact these rights, the due process legal responses still existent. Non-governmental organizations, there are many. The Asian Human Rights Commission, your Vice Chancellor brought it up earlier, and the National Human Rights Commission of India. These are very, very important, and they're probably the rationale for my being here in this course, because they are very much in support of teaching human rights as well as enacting human rights through education and all other aspects of society. So they have core groups that work on different aspects of this throughout India and Asia, and they keep track, the accountability of what's going on. So we have treaties, we have many different kinds of treaties that have been made. They're ratified between states and the global leaders at the United Nations. And once a country has treaties, which India has, then they have obligations to enact the clauses in the treaties. They have legal obligations. And another day I'm going to talk about legalities more. So the treaty bodies of the United Nations are committees comprised of independent members who are elected and represent their state. They review the reports of their state, meaning nation India, on the implementation of human rights. Members of the state attend the report session in dialogue with the UN treaty body, representative of their state, about its contents, including issues. The information each state's report precedes planning of policies and actions that may advance implementation of the ratified treaties. And then the last link I have on here was it's just to show you at the UN which bodies monitor each of those treaties, because they don't monitor just by the states, just by India. No, they monitor by the treaties that India has signed. So you have that accountability there internationally. So human rights and laws. The International Human Rights Law is a set of international rules established by treaty or custom on the basis of individual groups can expect. And they have inherent entitlements which belong to each person. Numerous non-treaty-based principles and guidelines called soft law, as I told you earlier, also belong to the body of international human rights standards. Again, soft laws are those more about humanitarian treatment behaviors that are harder to litigate in the courts, economic rights and so forth. And regional and international legal support is there. Typically what happens is if there's been a violation in a state or nation and the people within that nation are not getting results in the courts, then it's escalated to global courts. And the global courts can't do anything, can't enforce anything, but they can advise. They can tell the state, look, you need to adhere to this. You need to pay attention to this. And so they're more advisory, but you can take your case there, and then if you get a international response to your case, then you take it back to your state, and you're more likely to get a response. So that's this PowerPoint presentation, and thank you for bearing with me through all of this today, because it's been a long day for you with these different types of events in this session. So we have a reflection activity for you now. Can we pass these out? Thank you. So going back to earlier in our time together today, I'm just going to leave that there. We had some concepts related to human rights and dichotomies that I pointed out. And I would like you to use this now for a reflection. As I said at the beginning of our day or time together, a lot of this is about you and your life as a formal educator, but also as an informal educator. And you're educating right now, in fact, how you're interacting with this content. And so I would like you to take this reflection activity and respond on it. Let me see if I can get my copy of it open here. Here we go. So, conceptual dichotomies of human rights. The instructions are to write your thoughts about each set of concepts. So one set is animals and humanity. Thank you so much. How does each set pertain to your life, your livelihood? In other words, how you make your living or what you're doing with your life. Maybe you're just a full-time student and not able to work. Your community and beyond, internationally. How does each set pertain to your life? How does animals versus humanity relate to you and rights? One thing I heard yesterday from one of your faculty was that, she makes her diet decisions based on how the animal was treated when it was raised. And she chooses not to eat animals that were not treated humanely, that were not treated as a term we use as humans to say, is it fair? Is it cruel or not? Another example of animals might be, have we made any rules about their rights? Have we made any rules about, I know with the emphasis more recently on ecological care and sustainability, we have more protection for animals that are at risk with extinction. But what about those that are not? Do we have any rules as humans about how we treat animals? What does that mean for us in our rights as humans? So I want you to think about all of this, and I want you to put some notes about you on this. Questions? This is about you, not about me, not about this course. This is about you. On each of these, think about human rights, and between the two concepts, what's going on in your life? And I'm not going to read it, so you can be as private as you want. But I do want you to take this time to reflect. Okay? If there's a concept that you would like me to elaborate on, please let me know. These are tensions of human rights. How are they playing out in your life? What are examples in your community? What's going on in school? What's going on in the curriculum? How are these showing up? I was given the insight that some of the terms are not so commonly used here. So let me address a couple of them. Subjectivity versus fairness. So subjectivity means my decision and my moral thinking is subjective. It's influenced by something else. So maybe in this situation, I think this is okay. But in that situation, I couldn't tolerate in that situation. Think about changing your context. So maybe in front of your parents and your family, it's not necessarily okay to do this thing. But over here with your peer group or your friends or inside another social situation with different social rules, it's completely okay to do that. So subjectivity is about, is it a firmly clear situation of right and wrong? Or does it depend where you are? In India, is it okay to make a decision by caste because that's the traditional Hindu view of humans? Is that subjective or is that not? So that's subjectivity. Does the context influence fairness? Or is fair just fair no matter who you are or where you are? That's that situation, like an example in your life or something you're aware of, if not in your life, in your school, your community. When is something subjectively decided, and wherein is it just clearly fair or not? That's your example there. And then another one I was pointed out was refutation versus cooperation. So I think you understand cooperation, working together, or working, if not together, following what you're supposed to do, or the rules or the ethical codes or morals, or let's give it another example, doing things the way you're supposed to do, whether you like it or not. That's cooperation. In zones of conflict and violence, cooperation is particularly hard. But should you do it for the sake of well-being, for the sake of survival, the goals of human rights? Should you do it? Or should you refuse because you just can't forgive this other culture? And this goes on a lot in areas of war zones and violence. I've worked in several, and I've seen families pass on for generations and generations a lack of forgiveness for another cultural group in the same area. And even inside the USA, we have a lot of refugees come over, and I work in high schools where the children are not, the teenagers are not allowed to talk to or sit next to somebody else who 3 or 4 generations back, their families were against each other. I explaining to someone here yesterday how when I work in Northern Ireland, and I sometimes work in the integrated schools, everybody looks alike. You can't tell who's who, but boy, are they different cultures and separate, except where they're brought together in these special schools. They just don't integrate. So, refutation is refusing to cooperate. Where is there in your life a polarity, or somewhere in your community, or something you're aware of, where there's a lack of cooperation? They're refusing to cooperate, which is impeding rights in some way. That's what I mean by that. So this is a reflection activity for you to think about. What are all these contexts and situations? And I invite you to write another concept there that didn't come to mind to me. I got these concepts from much of the literature about human rights. This isn't something Carter just came up with. And these ideas are what the people who work for the United Nations think about all the time when they're setting codes, when they're setting up treaties. This is what they talk about and they think about when they come up with these rules. Would somebody like to suggest another polarity here related to human rights that is not in the discourse of human rights workers? Can you think of any other like dichotomy that should be in this reflection? Okay, well, if you do, please share. So keep reflecting and putting down these contexts, because this is rich material for your teaching. Again, whether you teach formally or informally, these are the situations you need to think about and act in and write curriculum for and find literature about. Okay, a few more minutes. Okay, so as I said, I won't collect it, but I did walk around and I noticed that it was really interesting to me that a lot of your papers filled up on the left side first. And that means there are lots of opportunities to think about these concepts in human rights here and in your lives. And some of them filled up on the right side, but most of you filled them up on the left side first. And I think that's really great, because you're perceiving, you're seeing what's going on here. And that's the first step, is seeing. And the next step is learning about the situation more, like the causes, and then finding the opportunities to address them. And you have the polarity on the right side to do that. And again, this is the discourse of people who have the profession of working in human rights. So If you see refutation going on, they're refusing to provide the rights, then you need to bring up cooperation. If our goal is to treat people, all people, or whatever the situation may be, providing human rights, bring up, this is what our goal is. This is where we're going. How can we do this together? And it's not just you, it's us. It's how can we do this together? How can we as educators bring this up in our curriculum and do this together? How can we do this together in our activism? We know from working for peace that rarely does anybody succeed as an individual activist. In fact, they often end up as martyrs in dangerous situations. You need to find others to work with you when you address conflicts. Okay, so I'll let you put that away, and please keep that in mind for the rest of your life. Go home and frame it. Don't lose it. And keep it in mind constantly, as these are our goals. Okay, I have one more activity, and then we're going to say, I don't know how you say goodbye in Mizo. Can you teach me? Or see you later. But I have one more activity for you, and that's just a reflection journal. So let's see if I can get to it here. Here we go. And I don't have this printed on paper. You can, if you want, you can do a new sheet of paper, and I'm going to ask you to journal every day. So if you want to just put this in your, however you want to journal every day, to continue it, find whatever you want to write on, and write these two things, please. How is human rights relevant to you, your students, community, work, and field? Most of you are, I think, heading into the field of education. How is it relevant? How does it relate to you? You, what are your rights? How are you experiencing your rights? Your students. Remember, you're a teacher, whether or not you have a teaching job yet, you're a teacher. People are watching you, they're interacting with you. How is this relevant to your community that you're here in this course and we're exploring these ideas together? Today we did a lot of history, very boring history, but it was important to know that people have thought about this throughout human history. And then, okay, what are you here for? I mean, maybe you're told to come here, but what are your goals in this course? What do you want to get out of this? What do you want to get out of this interaction with me here over the next few days? Besides some delicious snacks, thank you. Okay, could you please spend a few minutes writing this? And then I'll like to hear about some of your goals. If you would, please. Okay. May I hear some of your goals? That will help me in the next few days. What were your goals? Do you have any goals for me for this course that you can share? Delicious snacks and what else? Anything? All right, let's do this. So if you want me to talk about some of the conflicts in provision of human rights, put your thumbs up. You want me to talk about the conflicts in provision of human rights? Okay, a couple of people said yes. Okay. Would you like me to use critical theory? Put your thumb up if it's a yes, please. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Can you think of what else in the topic of human rights? We're going to go into peace education later, but in the topic of human rights. You saw what the Gian Grant, did they give you a printout of that? I think so, or no? The Gian Grant topics? Somewhere I think you have the Gian Grant topics. But as I said earlier today, I've tweaked it a little bit to bring in what I see as currency and what's going on right now in the world, and also what's going on in my experiences. Okay, anything else? I'm going to talk about human rights education. Do you want me to talk about pedagogy, how it's done? Education of about no, okay, not so much. Do you want me to talk about how it has been examples of it in India, because it has been facilitated in India? Thumbs up. Okay, all right. HR Ed in India. You know, I haven't made all my PowerPoints or everything yet, so. Because I'm a very responsive instructor. Okay, anything else that you would like to share with me that you would like me to include in the human rights portion of this course that may or may not be on that list? You can think of anything? Okay, you can tell me later and you can tell me personally if you like. Okay, well thank you for being here. We're done today. How do you say goodbye in Mizo? I don't know. Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.